Where am I? Who am I? And what exactly is Sand Island? Those answers and more coming up on the Planet Grom. Aloha everyone, my name is Russ and welcome to the first episode of the Planet Grom. It's a bit of an ostentatious and ambitious title, I'll admit, but I had an idea for a t-shirt design and decided to stick with it. Anyway, I enjoy moto vlogs and hearing people's stories and adventures from their cities and their lives and wanted to contribute, but I wanted to put my own spin on it for my own sanity's sake. So, what exactly is this channel and this show going to have to offer? Come with me, I'll tell you all about it. So what is the Planet Grom going to offer? Honestly, who knows? I've written for a few websites and even a magazine or two, and the one consistent thing that I've always come across is that while you're working on what you planned would be great, better ideas come along. Or maybe that's just my fear of finishing things. Regardless, I figured I would just ride, film a bunch of stuff, and see if I can't have fun doing something with video. And today, we're riding to an interesting place in Oahu called Sand Island. Along the way, I can tell you about it and the rough outline of where I see this channel going. In 2007, a fellow named Juan Lee flew to North Carolina from South Korea to tour the United States on a Honda Ruckus, a scooter that I am obviously pretty fond of since I'm riding it right now, and he puttered his way all across the country, never breaking 40 miles per hour. He would camp when he could, or he would find a bar and tell people his great story, and Americans, wanting to represent their country the best that they possibly could, usually offered to put him up for the night, even if it was just letting him pitch his tent in their backyard. He rode 18,000 miles all around the United States. But so what, right? Ewan McGregor rode from London to New York. How come people don't talk about that more often? Well, it's probably because of the mode of transport. McGregor had a capable motorcycle, able to handle whatever the world threw at it, where Juan had a 49cc scooter that did only 10 to 15 miles per hour in high elevation. It's the challenge that made the trip great for everyone, for Juan, for the folks at home, and for the dreamers who wanted to do something similar themselves. I mean, we often think that because we don't have the best of something, or the most specialized tool, we can't do things, but that just isn't true. If Juan could ride around the whole country on a $2,700 scooter, why couldn't anyone else? These challenges make riding more fun for the rider, and they make it more interesting for everyone else. Nathan Rogers rode from Portland, Oregon to Anchorage, Alaska on a Honda Grom, a bike that isn't exactly known for its speed, and he was called a nut for doing so. People do it all the time on real motorcycles, but it's when a challenge is introduced that it gets really interesting. At least for me. So when it came time to get a real motorcycle, a Grom was a natural fit for a variety of reasons. I like the maintenance, I like the miles per gallon, the lower high speed doesn't really bother me, I like we'll say the approachability of its mini bike aesthetics. And I like the challenge. I never had any interest in eating up as many miles as humanly possible every day, just listening to the drone of the interstate under my wheels. Ugh. I want to see towns. I want to explore back roads, learn about the area around me, and try to connect with other people. And it's at this point that I acknowledge the elephant in the room by saying that despite the channel name and my fondness for the Grom, this is my Honda Ruckus, and the reason I'm riding it today instead of my Grom is because I'm getting used to the Grom's clutch and working around traffic. I live in an area where the speed limits are all pretty low, so it makes for a good practice area, and thought you fine folks out there wouldn't be interested in seeing me learn the ins and outs of clutch work, but would rather see Hawaii instead. Anyway, my favorite author is, it's Christopher Moore, because he writes just the absolute best books in the entire world. But beyond him, Bill Bryson gets my nod as my second favorite writer, and definitely my favorite travel writer. He goes on trips and sees all sorts of things, documenting what happens along the way, but it's never boring. He never goes out and just does nuts and bolts writing like you would find in a travel guide. A lot of his books are just about his adventures in a place rather than about the place itself, and that's what made me want to get out and travel more. My wife thinks that in order to travel and see new things, you have to go to another country, which I suppose is the easiest way to see new things, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think you can find all sorts of cool stuff closer than you would normally think, and I am on a quest to find it. While I admit that America has a growing homogeneity about it, I steadfastly believe that there is still enough variety and identity in this country to make it worth getting out of your local area and exploring. Yes, Walmart is everywhere. You will always have the major players, but that doesn't mean there isn't amazing stuff just beyond them. You just have to look a bit. And let's talk about the people. I'm not alone in thinking that we're doing a fantastic job of closing ourselves off from each other, staying in our own homes, listening to our favorite news channels to hear our own prejudices and opinions echoed back to us, and believing that there are sides out there, and we're really in some sort of war with each other over whatever sells ads at that point in time. But I don't think this is true. At least, it's not as true as the people would have you believe. Yes, there are political people out there, and yes, it seems that everyone's a little too free with their unsolicited opinions on what would almost certainly be taboo topics at any other point in history. But I still believe that most people are good people, and even the ones who would fight you tooth and nail over your beliefs, lack of beliefs, or your own strong opinions would more than likely be friendly and helpful if they just remained unperturbed, we'll say. So, I decided to go riding and see a little bit of the world around me. Beyond the regretful title of the channel and blog, I'm not actually under the impression that I'm going to be riding all around the world. And I certainly don't mean to imply that the world is solely limited to the space that I myself can ride, like I'm saying Hawaii is the world to the dismissal of, the actual world. That said, Hawaii is part of my world, and I will ride around it as much as I can. And if I go anywhere else, I hope to ride there as well. I want to be out here, seeing the sights, smelling the smells, and feeling that I'm actually part of the world, and there's no better way to do this than on a motorcycle. I mean, sure, you could do it in a car if you need to, but come on, man, this is cooler. It's more fun, it's more practical, and you're less of a spectator. Rather than being in a car where a bragging point is how little the outside world can creep in through the windows, you're out here in your entirety. No cages, airbags, seatbelts, windows. You can see everything and everyone can see you. Not only that, but again, motorcycles. They're a blast, and this is why I will include a link below for you to download the Google map of this route if you want to see all this for yourself. Come on down to Hawaii, see what I see. And finally, there are questions in this world that need answers, and I intend to do my best to find those answers, and today the answer to one of those questions is on Sand Island. Specifically, what exactly is Sand Island? Contrary to what a lot of people think, there aren't only 8 islands in Hawaii, though there are only 8 main islands. There are actually somewhere between 137 and 152 islands in Hawaii, but some of them have completely eroded away, while others depend on the state of the tide. I'm talking about really small pieces of rock or reef out there that does just what an island is supposed to do, which is jut out of the water slightly. That said, there are some islands that are bona fide islands but are just too small to warrant being included in the Big 8, and these are islands like Sand Island, Ford Island, and Mokuli'i, which is also known as Chinaman's Hat in case you wanted to Google that. It's a pretty cool looking island. But I digress. We're talking about Sand Island, and when I picture it, I picture lush beaches, fine-grade sand, and low, soft waves gently rolling in. I mean, that's a wrong perception of the island, but it's what I pictured before I found out that before it was known as Sand Island, it was actually known as Quarantine Island. Boats would make a quick stop to Sand Island and drop off their sick to either get better or die before moving the boat along to the actual ports nearby. That's not a bad idea, though, because introducing sickness and disease to a population that might not have the abilities to fight it off is a pretty horrible proposition. I say kudos for the consideration and forethought of these boaters. Unfortunately, the history gets a bit darker, even darker than that, as Sand Island was used as an internment camp during World War II for people suspected of crimes and held without trials or even evidence. Over 600 Hawaiian citizens were kept there until 1943, when most were transferred to Army internment camps on the mainland. They left 149 prisoners in Hawaii, but transferred them to a new internment camp in Waipahu, which is west of here. Afterward, the island was mostly dedicated to garbage, until the 1970s, when a bunch of homeless Hawaiians cleaned it up and built homes for themselves. Then, in the 80s, the state of Hawaii reclaimed 180 acres for industrial and recreational development and gave the homeless people the boot without compensation. Today, it's still an interesting place, with Sand Island State Park, a park where you can play, picnic, swim, and fish. It has a lovely view of Honolulu, but it also has a lot of shipping containers that are delivered in an effort to mitigate the amount of large trucks driving around on Oahu proper. And it's also a home to a wastewater treatment plant. It was also a proposed spot to put the homeless people, which, contrary to a lot of tourist pamphlets, is a real thing on the island. The idea is to get homeless people away from the tourists who are having their vacations ruined by seeing someone who can't afford to live here. But there's actually a large homeless population, and some of them defy expectations and stereotypes by having families and having jobs, just not enough money to afford rent or a car. These families live in tents and makeshift homes and walk to work and school, so putting them far away from these required things perhaps isn't the smartest thing in the world. So welcome to Hawaii. It has occurred to me that this possibly isn't the best video to make as an introduction to Hawaii, since it isn't about beautiful beaches, gorgeous mountain ranges, the amazing culture, ukulele, or anything else that Hawaii is appropriately famous for. But it is part of Hawaii, and something that you will probably run into if you decide to come visit, so it's best to know it's here. Also, the park at the end of Sand Island is pretty cool, and I hear the fishing is pretty good if you want to try. I wouldn't really recommend swimming because of all the rocks and underground sewer canals, but there are designated spots to swim if you so choose. I mean, I wouldn't. Oahu has way better spots to swim if that's what you want to do. It's still an interesting place to see for yourself, it's just not the postcard Hawaii you're probably expecting. So that's it for this episode. I know it was a bit of a downer, but thought it was still worth recording and showing to you folks. Did you like it? What would you like to see in Hawaii? What questions do you have about the islands? Leave your comments below and be sure to subscribe so you can see more of Hawaii and more of the rides that are waiting for you. Until next time, mahalo nui loa.